Opera houses are some of the most glamorous palaces of entertainment and feature in cityscapes around the world. They're temples of music, architectural gems, and they're bursting with fascinating stories, famous composers, divas, amorous aristocrats, boys castrated to retain their high voices, and even ghosts. They're often centres of spectacular creativity, homes of vibrant opera and ballet companies and orchestras. Opera houses have played an important part in the urban social fabric. No self-respecting European city during the 18th and 19th centuries would be without an opera theatre, built to display cultural sophistication and wealth. But they can also be found in Asia, the Middle East, the Americas, and even the Brazilian rainforest. The first were built inside Renaissance palaces. Many early opera houses were lost to fire, but they're still being constructed today, high-tech in concrete, steel and glass. I'm Lucy Woodruff, and I love opera. And I find opera houses as atmospheric and exciting as the performances themselves. I want to take you with me around the world to discover some of the most beautiful theatres. We'll look at the architecture with Dan Cruikshank, admire the works of art and phenomenal craftsmanship. Meet the fascinating people who work there, the singers, the conductors, and the dancers. We'll find out what happened there in the past, and maybe hear a bit of backstage gossip too. Today we're in London, my home city, and standing just inside this great landmark, one of my favourite places, the Royal Opera House, built to impress and entertain in 1858. It wasn't the first theatre for opera in the capital, nor was it the first on this site, but there has been a tradition of opera performance right here for more than 260 years. England was once disparagingly labelled by a German critic, the land without music, a reputation that persisted in parts of Europe. But actually, it's had a vibrant history of music, with London a world centre for opera for several centuries. It remains one of the great hubs of the art form today. And today there are two opera houses in London, this one and the Colosseum, both of them attracting starry international and British talent. Charlie, are you there? Fantastic.
Nice to see you.
Great. Thank you so
welcome.
much.
Yes, welcome. You're coming into a tenor dressing room. Are you sure you want to do that?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm ready. When did you first perform here?
Well, my debut was actually way back in 2004. Yes, I sang Così fan tutte was my debut. So technically I've sung here every year since 2004.
Wow.
Yeah, so I love it. It's one of my favorite places.
Well.
Yes, I know it well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when people ask me, where's your favorite place to sing, which, people ask this pretty often.
Yeah.
And I always say Royal Opera is definitely in my top 3, if not my top favorite place. In truth, in a way I make a little list in my mind. So what are the things that make a theatre great to sing in? So you've got the theatre itself. What are the acoustics like? What is the facility? Do you have nice dressing rooms? Yes. How are the rehearsal rooms? And also things like, is the audience warm? Are they educated? Are they enthusiastic? All those things. The production value. And the Royal Opera is always literally at the top of that.
Although music dramas or semi-operas were considered an expensive business, they became popular in London from around the time of Charles II. In 1662, a real tennis court in Portugal Street, Lincoln's Inn Fields, was converted into a theatre by the impresario Sir William Davenant. And it was here that the first professional performance of Purcell's opera Dido and Aeneas took place in 1700. The Lincoln's Inn Fields Theatre doesn't survive, and nor does its competitor, the Dorset Garden Theatre on the Thames near Fleet Street. It was here that Purcell's King Arthur and also the Fairy Queen, composed a text by his friend the poet Dryden, were first shown.
Nowhere was more cosmopolitan than London, the biggest city in Europe, a commercial and industrial capital. In 1705, John Vanbrugh, the famous soldier, playwright, architect, landscape gardener and impresario, built the Queen's Theatre in the Haymarket, which was to be the first devoted to all-sung opera. Vanbrugh's rival, Christopher Rich, at Drury Lane, had been mounting successful productions of Italian-style operas in English. This competition led to an opera war, with both theatres competing for audiences. Unfortunately, Vanbrugh's venture struggled, and when the theatre slid into debt, he handed it to a manager and left to construct Blenheim Palace. Here we are in the Haymarket, London. Originally, this was known as the Queen's Theatre and later the King's Theatre Haymarket, and now it's Her Majesty's Theatre. It's one of the oldest theatre sites, and in the early 1700s was the home of opera in London. It was the venue for more than 25 of Handel's opera premieres. Handel wrote an Italian opera for the London stage, Rinaldo, which was a sensation in 1711 when first performed at the Queen's Theatre Haymarket with the expensive leading castrato Niccolini. Claire, tell me a little bit about the 18th century divas. I'm not saying you're a diva, okay?
Absolutely, don't say that. No, I'm a great colleague. Apart from the various castrati that Handel had to deal with, who, intelligent, handsome and very demanding, he did have to deal with various prima donnas, not least the supposedly ugly yet beautifully voiced Francesca Cuzzone. Now, I'm not saying she was ugly, but apparently people described her as plain-faced. Now, if somebody described me as plain-faced with a pretty voice, I think I'd have a bit of a strop as well, so I'm not surprised she was a diva. Opera in the 18th century was one of the only professions which actually allowed talented women to escape the rather narrow social confines of their lot in society and garner fame and fortune, as Cuzzone did, but she wasn't the only one. Bordoni was also a talented diva working in London at the same time. And I think history has made a lot of the rivalry between these two divas. Interestingly, I think we're not quite sure as to whether in real life there was that much of an issue, but it's interesting that the opera houses worked on that. In the 1720s, the King's Theatre was in all sorts of financial crises. And so it had the idea of pitting these two divas against each other on stage. And Handel wrote 2 or 3 operas, not least Alessandra, that I've sung in actually, with my diva next to me. To sing side by side. Now, Cuzzone was known as having a more beautiful sort of legato, slow singing, sort of cantabile style, and Bordoni was full of the fireworks and the coloratura. But I'm sure they could both do both, but Handel, in a sense, the way he wrote these roles, was also demarcating that Bordoni would be singing in this style and the Cuzzone camp would be in another style. And there is one story that Princess Caroline was at some performance, and actually the performance stopped and the two singers turned to face each other. They had what can only be described as a bitch fight, scratching their hair, but apparently pulling the wigs off, scratching their eyes out. Wow. And the whole performance stopped. But I mean, that doesn't tend to happen now. It's just the kind of black looks in the dressing rooms afterwards.
You can imagine. William Hogarth, the great 18th century satirist, had fun portraying the rich going to the operas, while a wheelbarrow man sells waste paper made up of the English works of Shakespeare, Dryden and Ben Jonson. Hogarth's engraving, Masquerades and Operas, or The Bad Taste of the Town, of 1724, shows a crowd flocking to entertainments featuring extravagantly paid castrati and divas. Then, as now, far more people did not go to the opera than did. Opera was considered by many in London to be disreputable and foreign. It displayed over-the-top emotions, was performed in a language most English people didn't understand, and was sung by Italians, which meant Catholics, not a good thing. Rather exciting, isn't it, to be at the Soane Museum today, John Soane Museum, looking at these incredible 18th century prints by Hogarth.
It's an absolute thrill. I was fascinated to find, looking at this is the second print in the sequence of the Rake's Progress, and the Rake in the room with him is a composer sitting at a keyboard with his back to us.
And we think it might be Handel.
There was a great deal of suspicion about opera. Addison, the journalist and poet, said that it was ridiculous for the English to sit in a room and listen to foreigners singing to them in a language that none of them understood, namely Italian.
This is a list of all the expenses this poor Rake, terribly extravagant life.
Yes.
He was giving gifts.
Yes, it says that
castrati.
this is a list of the presents given to Signor Farinelli. Farinelli was the greatest singer of his age, was the greatest castrato. There was a general suspicion of foreign things, and one of the things in this picture you can see is that the dancing master, who stands in the middle with a little instrument, it's called a pochette, or a kit, or a Tanzmeister Geiger, or a dancing master's fiddle, and he's dressed in the French style. He's also cutting a little caper with his feet in a dancing ballet position. His coat is ludicrously tight. I think he's definitely a caricature of a Frenchman. And again, the English behind him are pointing at him and showing off just what a waste of time and money he is. This is a lovely picture of a clash of cultures. Leaning out of his window and with his hands pressed to his ears and his violin bow clenched in one fist is a foreign musician who's been driven to distraction by the street noises of London. Everybody in this picture is making a terrible row. Handel, who had a house in Brook Street, used to get complaints from his neighbours because he was too noisy and his singers made a racket when they were playing.
Castratis like Farinelli and Tenducci were literally opera singers who were castrated at puberty to preserve their high-pitched voices. This was unfortunately pretty common in Italy at that time. The church turned a blind eye to it because women weren't allowed to sing in church, and they needed these high voices for this amazing church music which was written at the time. And obviously that sort of flowed into the opera genre as well, and so composers started writing for castrati in secular music as well as sacred. Farinelli, Tenducci, household names, were an utter sensation, because when they got to London, not only did they have these sort of sweet, high, pure voices singing these female roles and male roles, but they had the strength of a manly chest, as you can see, and a sort of breathing technique that's been honed over 10, 20 years.
Since childhood.
Absolutely. Yeah. So they were much stronger. It's not just putting a tall boy in there. It is a man. Yes. And when I say man, they were very manly men because they were adored by everyone. The kings, queens, they were immensely wealthy. They were often given loads jewels and riches. Yes. And they had masses of lovers, not least because you couldn't impregnate somebody. Safe, absolutely. So, I think they were a real catch, which sort of only added to this sort of persona of the castrati as, a total heartthrob of the age.
Yes. John Rich, the actor-manager, commissioned John Gay's Beggar's Opera, which reputedly made rich gay and gay rich. It was a satirical and funny show about London lowlife, and in particular, the misadventures of Polly Peachum, Lucy Locket, and their lovers. It premiered in 1728 and was such a hit for the Lincoln's Inn Fields Theatre, managed by John Rich, that the money he made from this popular production funded the building of the first Covent Garden Theatre on the site of the present-day Opera House. It wasn't just an opera house, but a patent theatre licensed for public performance, one of two theatres with a royal patent permitting them to perform drama in London. The Theatre Royal Drury Lane was the other. The two theatres were in competition. The Covent Garden Theatre was built on land leased to John Rich from the Duke of Bedford and was designed by the architect Edward Shepherd. Unfortunately, it burnt down in 1808. and Handel's organ and many of his manuscripts were lost. Tragically, 23 firemen also lost their lives when the building collapsed.
Hello and welcome to the Royal Opera House.
So fantastic to see you. Well, may I introduce you to Dan Cruikshank?
Hi, Dan. So lovely
Great
to meet you.
architect.
Nice to meet you.
Story.
Lovely to have you here. Let's go round. Here we are in the foyer, in the old foyer.
Observation is very simple, isn't it? I mean, that's, I suppose, the way things were in the 19th century. Theatre land in London, these are businesses that run their time and money were in short supply. If you think of the great continental opera houses, it's relatively modern. Entering at the rustic level, the podium level. Well, this is relatively recent recreation. Let's assume it's authentic. I'm sure it is. But would be gas lights, a very different quality of light. Warmer light, flickering light.
Lots of gas.
Lots of smelly gas. This is the foundation stone of the Smirk Opera House. It was laid infamously on Christmas Eve, 1808. It's a brilliant foundation stone. I love the brevity. I love the lettering too. Long live George, Prince of Wales. No nonsense about the architect.
Robert Smirk was the architect of the second Covent Garden Theatre. He'd also designed the British Museum. It reportedly cost £150,000 to build. The theatre was a little smaller than the first theatre, but held a lot more people, 3,000 in all. Taking just 10 months to build, the new theatre opened on the 18th of September 1809. In order to fund this expensive project, the company attempted to put up ticket prices, only to find there was a riot on their hands when nightly demonstrations to return to the old prices turned noisy and nasty. Eventually, the management had to relent, and pit prices were reduced from 4 shillings to 3 shillings and sixpence, and some of the private boxes opened to the public. But the combination of the fire and the old price row, as it became known, meant the Opera House was running at a loss. The second Covent Garden Theatre was magnificent. It had a portico with Doric fluted columns that resembled the Temple of Minerva on the Acropolis at Athens. It was enclosed in wrought iron railings. The upper parts were decorated by relief panels in which appear representations of drama, gods, muses, and Greek poets alongside Shakespeare, Milton, and some of their literary characters. In niches, there were statues of tragedy and comedy. Everything about it was lavish and luxurious, with an interior of expensive marbles and red velvet. Surrounding the horseshoe-shaped auditorium, there were private boxes for the wealthy, some of which had anterooms. These were let by the night or by the year. In 1856, in the auditorium of the Opera House, hundreds of drunken men and women, described at the time as disreputable types, cavorted at a masked ball organised, in the absence of Frederick Jai, the theatre director, by a magician, a well-known entertainer who had taken it over for the event. The theatre was brightly lit by gas jets and flaming chandeliers, above which was a carpenter's shop and a storeroom which started smouldering during the evening. At 5 a.m, a fire took hold. There was a rush for the exits, and although several women were reported as fainting and being trampled on, no one was seriously injured. The roof collapsed soon after it was evacuated. Later that day, crowds, including a saddened Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, came to view the scene of destruction. It was a disaster for London. Unfortunately, several important works of art were lost, including paintings by Hogarth and the exceptional collection of opera scores housed there. When the second Opera House at Covent Garden burnt down in 1856, the tenacious director Jai eventually managed to arrange royal patronage to build a new theatre. Fortunately for Frederick Jai, in 1858, a new Royal Italian Opera arose on the Covent Garden site, designed by Edward Barry, the son of the architect of the Houses of Parliament, and built for Frederick Jai in just 6 months, incorporating the statues and reliefs from the earlier building. It was initially known as the Royal Italian Opera House. It was built at a time when London was a rich, international metropolis, and when the opera houses around Europe in Italy, France and Germany were mostly grand and ornate, but Barry chose a restrained English neoclassical style in harmony with the Italian flavour of Inigo Jones's Covent Garden Piazza.
So this building was built in 1858, and it stood the test of time, and it was presenting wonderful top-class performances and music from then until now, and it sells out quite frequently, almost every week or every second production or every second night is completely sold out. So being part of that, for me, is unbelievable. I don't really quite understand it at the moment. I think later on, when I retire, I would look back and think, wow, those were the days.
It's so mighty, so majestic with such a tradition, not a bit intimidating. Or is it? Or does it actually...
Of course it is.
Yes.
And as a performer, you stand in this iconic stage. You are across the history, you're sharing the stage with the most important performers of the history. And you're trying to depict a little part of the human cultural, heritage, the being translator of the heritage of our civilization. Those things are really quite huge, hanging in the air whilst you're trying to sing one phrase in one aria.
But I guess also you get energy from that. The realization you're with these giants. They're still there. They are there because you're singing their music.
I like to think, every time I have a chance to go on stage, I like to think that those greats who I admired all my life, Marie Callas, John Sutherland, they're taking me by the hand because they've been here, they've been doing this once themselves. It was probably quite scary for them too when they started.
So here's Edward Barry, the architect, who built it in 6 months for Frederick Schein. I can't believe that he looks so much older. Apparently the poor man died at the age of 50.
Yeah, well, that's what it does to you, building something like this in 6 months.
Opera house building.
But he's a fascinating guy. So he's the third son of Charles Barry, who designed Palace of Westminster with Pugin. But the dynasty of the family dynasty, they were classicists. And this guy was a real master of the classical language, as you can see in this building,
yes.
And did some very significant buildings. Apart from this, famously, one of my favourite French Renaissance one is the Charing Cross Hotel. Lovely. It's terrific. But and also weirdly enough, he took over completing the Palace of Westminster for his father in the Gothic style. The Victoria Tower is actually him, same date as this, 1850 and 1860.
They worked together, didn't they?
Well, yes. Well, the father died in 1860, but he took over the burden of the Palace of Westminster. So when he's designing this, he's also completing the Palace of Westminster. If you think of the language for this, it's very interesting because this is built quickly, money and time were an issue. It's a speculation business, and so. But yet he's created, in the quite difficult circumstances, a powerful urban statement. And they got a lease from the Duke of Bedford at that time, the Russell family. They built on a lease. It wasn't long, 90 years. It wasn't that long a lease. So, it had to earn its money quite quickly.
Yes.
And I said that, with money being a concern and the lack of time, 6 months is amazing. I can really almost not believe it.
6 months is not even enough with the modern
and you
building
think
equipment.
Absolutely. And think of the worries. Structurally, it's got to be a wide span, good sight lines. Acoustics, it was kind of an age when acoustics was still a bit of an unknown science, but they packed it with ornament, plaster and hessian, and so to absorb sound. So all these things, fire prevention, good raking of seas, clear span, really, and all under, you're under cultural art, you can make it work quickly.
Just to put it in a perspective, when the Royal Opera House was doing the renovation of the Limbri, the opening up project, it took 2.5 years. Just to imagine that they built the core, the heart of the theatre in 6 months.
With all the modern technology, and he managed to get this built.
Mind-boggling, no?
In 6 months.
But to get that quite big span and to therefore get your the sight lines.
It's a great achievement.
It is.
Yes, most certainly. Thank you very much.
Yes,
thank you. Let's next time we come, let's bring some painting of Blackbeard and get the right name too. Edward Middleton Barry, sir.
Exactly.
There we are.
Yeah.
this is an amazing image of the opera house. It's interesting. So it's presented to the opera house by builders, Lucas Brothers, 1858. There's a little bit, I think, a bit later because this floor hall's not completed till 1860, so thereabouts. But what's incredible is this is the official image, isn't it? How it was meant to be portrayed, how it portrayed itself, how the builders and the establishment of the opera house saw themselves. It's really interesting. Great sedate temple in Bow Street. There's all the genteel life going on around about. You don't get a sense of it being the heart of a good old wholesale fruit and veg market. No. Even the floor. Well, indeed. Even, but getting over that delightful subject for a second. But even the flower market is not shown as a flower market, as a repository of would have been, as you were saying, would have been a beacon of light shining through the glass and the slender cast of wrought iron structure. Except there's one little thing going on here, isn't there? Look, a drunken woman being carried off.
Oh, so there's a reference to the seedier side.
Yes. This is, remember the magistrates' court here, Bow Street Court. So this is a porte cochere, isn't it? Basically, it's a covered entrance passage. You entered from the side. I seem to remember a lot of the Corinthian capitals were damaged, or even some were not there. I may be wrong. So these are from the Smirk 808 building, so they're probably better quality. Maybe they're terracotta, like a code stone, artificial stone. They can withstand London's frightful weather. You know, London's not just wet, but full of soot. You know, acidic soot dust kills things like this, but certainly stucco decoration. This is good, isn't it? In fact, the staircase is very good. This is this is cast iron, of course, gilded. Some wrought iron over there. Lovely details with kind of flowing, kind of baroque ornamentation with a slight Greek revival touch. Very, very typical of the mid-19th century, I guess. Oh, it is. You know, it's a Palladian interior, isn't it? Like André Palladio's sort of Egyptian hall. Very fashionable. It's just a giant pilasters, almost from floor level, ionic pilasters, and columns over there. A screen of columns. Oh, interesting. It's grand, but it's actually quite simple. So in terms of time and money.
Now, Anush, do you think you could take us to the royal retiring room?
Oh yes, let me show you the way.
Great. Yes.
So you know this
is the royal retiring room
for the royal family.
For the family,
for the wife and children.
But down below, I believe, down this staircase, which goes down to the discreet entrance for
the orchestral pit.
The pit. There's another little room, isn't there, or recess with a divan where the Prince of Wales, Edward, would sit with his cigar.
Yes.
Conveniently.
Very conveniently, it's placed in front of. And then it was the door of the chorus ladies' dressing room.
Of course.
Oh, I see.
And so that was shared because there were ballet company and the opera company. That was shared also by ballet court or ballet ladies. Yes. So depending on the night, there was a special entertainment for the Prince of Wales.
So he was sitting in that divan with his cigar, and the girls would come out of the door opposite. It's absolutely wonderful.
And now, of course, it's part of the retirement space for the musicians of the orchestra.
Oh, because the pit's next door to it.
Yes, exactly. So that's in front of the entrance of the pit. But what fascinates me as a modern opera singer is that you were allowed to smoke in the theatre at the time.
Incredible. I wonder how that worked actually with the gas.
With the gasoline,
gas,
yes.
Yeah, deadly. There would have been not smoking during performances, surely. Could people smoke? No.
I'm pretty sure they would.
Yeah,
if they drank during the performances.
Yes.
In the boxes.
Yes, only 50 years ago even singers were smoking, thinking that this is a healthy thing to
No,
do.
it's an important point. These fires weren't just the naked flames of light, they were people just through cigars and so on. Yeah, of course. Gosh. Deadly stuff.
And of course, this beautiful turquoise blue would have been very dirty because of the smoke.
Yes.
I suppose there was a lot of cleaning to do. You know, this beautiful, stunning colour.
And the clock is wonderful. I see it's made in Paris.
It's very Ormolu, isn't it?
I mean, presumably that's been here a long time. It looks terrific. And then the ceiling's fantastic survival. Just a vent, that's the part of the gasolier extraction system.
Gasolier.
Would have been obviously gas
Amazing
lamps,
technology.
terrible fumes going up there, extracted.
So the King and Prince of Wales, whoever, wouldn't
die.
Fumigated.
Always a good idea.
Always a good idea.
But I must say, reminding myself of the auditorium, it is, of course, glorious, ostentatious, but what I love personally is such spaces, these mid-Victorian spaces in theatre opera houses are essentially, utilitarian machines for the presentation and performance of music. That's what, in the end, that's what's going on, the wide span, engineering, ornamentation, beautiful as it is to do with creating, good for acoustics, sort of absorbing the sound, all the ornamentation and the materials is made out of. And of course, getting people in and out, it's a big deal, the terror of fire. You want to get, the planning, the exit systems. That's what I mean, is an ingenious Victorian machine for the arts, to give pleasure and to create beauty. But it works, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's a given, it's ostentatious and glorious. But the skeleton behind that intrigues me. But of course, the surface decoration is terrific. The dome, shallow dome, Pantheon-like. I think, again, you've got to imagine it lit. The lighting now is very nice, the low-level electric lighting. But I guess that's equivalent to the gas level, romantic dark. Because it's another reminder, when you come to these places, particularly slightly lower down the social spectrum, the music hall was an escape for people who lived in quite difficult conditions, in dowdy apartments or lodgings, music hall interior. But even the opera house is something of that. It was meant to be escapist fairyland, an alternative to your humdrum ordinary life. You walk into this fantastic fantasy of classical architecture, the Roman world, the great domed, plush velvets and gilding and sparkling in the gaslight.
The gilded auditorium has 3 even horseshoe tiers. The interior designer, the Italian Raffaele Monti, used a palette of cream, gold and red with the addition of a band of turquoise in the ceiling. The tiers have curvaceous fronts with female herms modelled by Raffaele Monti. Also by him, the tympanum relief over the proscenium show personifications of music and poetry and Queen Victoria's head between.
Yeah, I remember the old opera house. I remember this was quite a big deal because when it expanded 20 or so years ago, where we're standing now was part of the floor hall, wasn't it? Which is part of the fruit and veg market, a going concern, a great wholesale market that moved, and then a lot of rebuilding took place. And people were fearful of change. It is on the Piazza, London's first square from the 1630s. Inigo Jones, very, very precious. Although the early buildings had gone, but there were early buildings here, 19th century buildings. In fact, of course, it works terribly well. One can say that after a few decades of experiencing it. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? There's the opera house, rebuilt several times, mostly as a result of terrible fires. Each version of the building, takes the classical tradition, reworks it. Well, this again is a reinvigoration of the classical tradition and create this sort of Italian-style loggia up here. It's really a terrific addition. It really adds to the experience of Covent Garden. It's terrific looking across the piazza. Terrific isn't Piazza. It was called that by Londoners from the start, from the 1630s. People recognise it. Inigo Jones, the architect, building it for the Earl of Bedford, not quite a Duke at that point.
Oh, okay.
He was drawing on the lessons of Italy and of France, of Place Vosges in Paris, Place Royale as it was. And people recognised it was bring a bit of the grand tour of Italy into West London. It's very exciting for people at the time, and they called it the Piazza. Obviously, opera house, it's a business. It has to look after itself financially. It has various financial aids, but nevertheless, it has to work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it does now, as far as I can see. I come here occasionally. It's always packed with people who really enjoy the experience.
It's such a wonderful space.
It's tremendous because it's given London back one of its forgotten, but one of its greatest mid-19th century structures, the Floral Hall. There was a wholesale flower market in the daytime, but in the evening it was often used by the opera house as an overflow space, as is the case now. The top part, the fanlight and the vault was burnt off in the 1950s, so it was flat-roofed and rather sad. So in this recreation, this reinvigoration of opera house, it's been rebuilt.
Yes.
And it's terrific. It's a wonderful building. That facade would be wrought iron ribs and glass, like the Crystal Palace of the 1850s. This was cutting edge, but made into poetic architecture because lots of ornament and historic references, again classical.
Yes.
This facade here, we're looking at the inside of it, of course, onto Bow Street, the opera house just on my left, where it was reproduced. It had an L-shaped plan, and reproduced another version of it on the Piazza. That's gone during the redevelopment, but it survives and it's been removed and rebuilt in Borough Market.
Amazing! I didn't realise that, yes.
It looks terrific.
Yes.
It's also got its fanlight back. You know what? Coming here this morning, I was excited.
Yes.
I'm going into the Royal Opera House.
Yes.
Interesting continuity. The lovely panels with these Grecian scenes
Yes.
from the Parthenon. The Parthenon is interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, it is a monumental building.
Yeah.
It's an opera house. Public building, but of course it's a private business operation in the mid-19th century. But in a way, I suppose what it does is make manifest the popular love of the arts.
And the importance of opera.
There is, of course, a strange irony. The building that stood here on Russell Street, I knew them pretty well. They were a mixture of buildings, some of which were 18th century, demolished by the opera house for its extension. The irony being at the far end on the piazza was Tom's Coffee House, the remains of Tom's Coffee House, which was...
Where Handel used to hang out, is that
Well, he
correct?
did, yes, and it was inside a late 17th century building. Demolition starts, I approach Opera House and I get their agreement, they own it, to salvage the panelling and to salvage 2 fire surrounds of the early 18th century. And you say that's where Handel went, to Tom's Coffee House. These fire surrounds, he'd have known them.
Yes.
What I did, I donated them to the Handel House Museum in Brook Street,
Brilliant.
which is where they are.
Yeah, wonderful.
So there is something good came out of this demolition. They've gone back to Handel's house.
Yeah. The Royal Opera House has had a variety of uses. During World War I, it was a furniture storage depot. And then, in World War II, a dance hall for troops on leave. After the war, it reopened as the home of the opera and royal ballet with Tchaikovsky's Sleeping Beauty. Its mission statement was to be an all-year-round international opera house financed by government for the first time in London's history. Covent Garden's support by the Arts Council assured its post-war future. London became the great international centre for opera, partly due to the heavy bombings suffered by other opera houses in Europe. And the Cold War meant that the opera houses of Eastern Europe were marginalised, many of the musicians having fled to Britain and America. I'm delighted to be here in Pappano's room, which is great.
Yes, he's the third musical director I've had here since I've been here. I started in 1976 with Colin Davis. Shorty was still here conducting, but he wasn't musical director then.
Yeah.
Well, in Colin's time, of course, we had a company then. We had a company of singers who would do a lot of the parts in the operas. Now, of course, we don't have a company anymore, but we have the Young Artist programme now.
You're in rehearsals at the moment for Bohème, aren't you?
We're doing 17 performances of Bohème, so we have got 3 full casts, 2 conductors, and the very last performance, the 17th performance, is one I'll do. Because my job here is a member of the music staff, which is a wonderful job. It's very varied. We coach, we play, we conduct backstage, we assist conductors, and we conduct now and again.
Oh, so Anush, tell me about working in this building. Do you find it a comfortable place for artists?
Working in this building has been a dream. Since the day I have entered, some 10 plus years ago, as a young artist. It is constructed in a way that you have absolutely everything very close to you. It's a very big building from inside. It looks like a labyrinth. It takes you 2-3 months to get used to every corner and learn the nooks and understand how to shortcut to go to canteen upstairs with a great terrace, and on a sunny day we all go out and sunbathe. The rehearsal rooms are constructed in a way that they are very close to each other, so you can go from one place to another. So as an artist, whenever I enter this building, I feel that I'm surrounded by support. Even if it's not human support, it has been thought through on every step. You know, learning your music, then going to the rehearsal room, then going to the studio rehearsals, then going to the stage, and all of that surrounded by a lot of thought, a lot of structure, a lot of functional help. Apart from the artistic part of it, it's a really dreamlike experience to be working in this building. What I really, really like is the recent project of opening up the theatre, the building to the public.
It's great, isn't it?
I absolutely adore the idea. First of all, because people come in to just spend time, but also you get to be part of the theatre. You get to actually make this building live and breathe, which I really love.
Yes. So on the stage, when you're singing,
Yeah.
can you hear yourself singing for a start?
Yeah, I mean, just technically the
I don't think
acoustic
in
is good.
all the opera houses you can you?
No, there's a big difference in every opera house. You know, some have wonderful acoustics where you can whisper and hear everything.
Yes.
Others are horrible.
Yeah.
Unless you have a box of a set, you
Yeah.
feel like you're singing into a pillow.
Yeah, I
But
know.
Royal Opera in general is a good acoustic.
Yeah. And do you get any reverb or anything like that?
There's always a bit back, but I mean, I think as singers, it's really good to try to not rely on it too much. I mean,
Yes.
for me, I would say I do rely on it too much. I love to hear, when I hear the sound very well, you feel more confident in a way, you know? Sometimes if the set is extremely open, you have a hard time hearing things. Or if there are a lot of walls, it can be different every time.
And do you watch the monitors actually?
Yeah, I do kind of a peripheral kind of view
Yeah.
thing most of the time.
Yeah.
There are some points where I need to take a look, but in general, I just have it in view. I don't wear my glasses on stage or contacts, so I can see the arms, but you know, I don't want to see the conductor's face just in case he's saying, "What are you doing?"
What the hell is doing that?
You know, that could mess up my performance, you know.
How does the London audience differ to other audiences? And are there any idiosyncrasies that...
I would say always polite, but
Yeah.
not without a lot of passion. They don't mind to show their emotions when they
Right,
want to. So
right.
and they cheer very very strongly. So,
Yes.
but it could be very different from an audience in Italy or
Yes.
something. But I always feel personally welcome, and you know, and I feel it's a warm audience
How
who's
fantastic.
educated.
Yes.
You know, because you know,
Really?
not everyone. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like they know
Yeah.
the music very
Yes.
well. You know,
Yeah.
so for example, when we did our debut here of the Don Giovanni, I thought to myself, wow, they really like Mozart here. Because even in Germany sometimes, you know, with the Mozart, they're like, bravo, it's very nice.
Yes.
And then, you know, Wagner or Verdi, they'll say, wow, that was amazing.
Yes.
But with the Mozart, they seem even calm, like they've had so much of
Extraordinary,
it, you know.
yes.
But here, no, they
Because
were
Don
going
Giovanni
crazy.
is the best, isn't it?
It's one of the best
It's
ones,
just
for
one
sure.
of the
It's
best.
beautiful.
It's
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it so much. Thank you, Sergei. It's so fantastic to see you.
Oh, so fantastic to
Really
see you too.
great. And
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. And here's your
Pleasure.
violin.
Here's my violin, very nice. Not very old,
Yeah.
but old enough to produce a nice, good sound.
Warm, rich sound.
Yes,
Yes.
and contribute the quality of Royal Opera House Orchestra sounds.
Ah, yes. So you're a concert master, of course. Can you explain exactly what the role of a concert master is at the Royal Opera House?
The person is responsible, we can say, for perfect tuning of the orchestra. So concertmaster, sometimes called as a leader. You need to provide a strong connection between the conductor and the rest of the
And the rest
orchestra.
of the orchestra.
Basically, and actually it's a next, after the conductor, next musician responsible for the quality of the performance and high standards of the performance. On top of that, sometimes taking responsibility for leading the entire performance and orchestra. The concertmaster should be the highly skilled instrumentalist.
Yes.
Because this role requires to play also this lots of tricky
And you're the lead,
violin
are you
solo.
the lead violinist as well as a concert master?
Yeah, normally concertmaster sits in front of the conductor as the first chair.
Yes.
In front of the first row. That it's
I've seen
number
that.
one
Tell me, how many orchestral musicians are at your disposal?
at the moment. Just slightly below 100, but the season is huge. It's performance literally every day, sometimes 2 performances a day, sometimes we get Sunday performances. And it starts in September, lasts until the 22nd of July around.
What is the acoustic like, from your perspective as an orchestral musician at the Royal Opera House?
Personally, I'm happy with the acoustic in this opera house. I mean, I think that creates a good overall acoustic.
Can you hear the orchestra in the pit very clearly?
Someone sits just in front of woodwinds or brass players, it creates some difficulties.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. But
Of
from
course.
my position, it's quite balanced and nice.
Do you
Another thing
have-
is a royal ballet, I must say.
Oh, yes, we haven't really talked about that.
A lot of
So you play for the dancers too?
play for dancers. Coming to the ballet studios upstairs, rehearsing with them, it's always a joy.
For people who don't really understand anything about conducting, how can you explain the importance of the conductor?
All I can say is With a brilliant conductor, you get a brilliant performance. With a poor conductor, you get a poor performance. What they do is an enigma still to me.
And we experience it from both sides.
Exactly, I'm the fan.
Well, I
I'm
wish
your
I had...
fan, I know.
I'm your fan, Lucy.
And now it's time to tell a tale.
In our next episode, we stay in London's West End, walk down the road to the wonderfully playful and eclectic Colosseum. It's only a short distance, but a world away in terms of architectural style from the neoclassical Royal Opera House. The Colosseum is as flamboyant and innovative Edwardian theatre. Performances at the Royal Opera House are usually in the original language, but at the Colosseum everything is sung in English. Both theatres are homes of top-notch opera and ballet companies and world-class orchestras. The audience at the Royal Opera House tends to dress up, whereas the Colosseum prides itself on a more casual vibe. Personally, I like to dress up for both houses, as the night at the Opera in London is a special occasion. I can't wait to show you around. See you there soon.